know what really makes us mad is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I am your co-host, Justin Hensley.
And I am your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And today we are talking to Johnathan Ford of the band Unwed Sailor, as well as Roadside Monument, Pedro the Lion. Let's see if we can name them all. Warlord, Raft of Dead Monkeys, backing vocals on 90 Pound Wuss, Broncho.
Decahedron?
Is he?
Maybe touring. Lots
Maybe.
of touring. I know he played with Damien Jurado.
Native Lights, was that the name of that band? Another Tulsa band. Oh, I want to get them all. Mr. Bishop's Fist.
Fell Sway.
Yes.
Early Day Miners.
There it is. That's the one I was trying to think of.
I think that's one
All
of
of
the most prominent ones.
Yeah. This is a really good conversation. Unwed Sailor's new record, Truth or Consequences, just came out on Spartan Records. Highly recommend everyone check it out. It's probably my favorite Unwed Sailor record I've heard in a while. So it's really, really good. What are we talking about today?
We are talking about the year 1985, and the record is Lowlife by New Order. Dark Horse classic? I don't know. I feel like this is a record that is maybe more commercially important than it is critically regarded. I feel like this record gets overlooked. I don't know. We get into it a little bit, but
One thing I didn't mention is that Pitchfork did like a review of like a box set of like the first 5 records or something like that. It was like the first 10 years or something like that. And this was the lowest rated one that they gave. Like, of course, Pitchfork did that, but
yeah, it's the record that it's the first record to have a single. It's the Mersh record, I guess.
Yeah. Also, if you head over to our Patreon and donate $1, you get access to all our bonus audio. And we don't do much chart diving on this episode. In fact, little to none. So on the Patreon, we're going to do a deep dive on 1985.
Yeah.
And you can get that on patreon.com/punklautopod. You can also find us on all the social medias, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Email address is punklautopod@gmail.com. Voicemail is 202-688-PUNK. And Substack as well.
Yeah. Punk Lotto Pod. We got that social media handle synchronicity. Because it's not going to be taken.
Yeah. It's nice. Really, if whatever you're on, if we're on it, just look Punk Lotto Pod, and it's probably we're the ones. It'd be weird if someone else had it. It'd be strange. It's like someone did it on purpose. But yeah, enjoy this conversation about New Order. Today we're being joined by Johnathan Ford of the band Unwed Sailor, amongst other bands. Johnathan, how's it going?
It's going great, man. Good to be talking with you guys, hanging out.
Yeah. Unwed Sailor just released a new record in May, Truth or Consequences. How's the reaction to it been?
So far, so good. Yeah, it seems like people are enjoying it. We had one setback where we're experiencing the vinyl delays that everyone is experiencing. So at this point, you can listen to it on digital or CD, which is cool with me because CD is actually my favorite format. So I'm fine with that. But I think a lot of people are still waiting to get it in the mail, or buy it in the store. So, but all the people that have listened to it have said they really like it. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, that vinyl delay it's slowing everybody down. I think there's my friend runs a record label, and I was talking to him yesterday, and he said it's some plants have a 12-month turnaround.
Yeah, I just try not to think about it because it whenever I found that out, this is doom hit me. It's so then how do I release records anymore? That kind of thing. So I'm just hoping it kind of the bottleneck breaks or something where it just runs more smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, everyone's gonna have to buy CDs again or something, I guess.
Yeah. We'll see a boom in tapes again because we had a little bit of.
Yeah. I saw someone this week say maybe the vinyl bottleneck will lead to people taking tape releases seriously again.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah, and what the weird thing is most people don't even know why the delay is happening. Some people assumed it was COVID related, but no one's 100% sure.
Well, I think the big business is catching on finally with the vinyl thing. I know Amazon has a subscription series now.
Yeah.
Where they print 100,000 copies of a Paul McCartney record, and for $25 a month, they just send you a random classic rock record or whatever that you can go buy cheaper at the record store or even cheaper at a used store.
Yeah.
So 100,000 records a month is gonna cause a bottleneck. So we'll see. Maybe the craze will die down or something. But I mean, we'll keep releasing vinyl. No matter what, it's just what we do, what we've always done. It's just a little harder right now.
Yeah, Walmart entered the vinyl game as well. They have their own exclusive vinyl too now.
Well, I hope all these big companies at least will invest in the technology some, because with that lacquer plant fire in California, that's not going to help production. That hasn't helped production at all. They really
maybe Amazon will build their own plant or something to handle that kind of output.
Yeah, I mean, for vinyl collectors it's great because there is now way more options, but yeah, it is a bummer for more indie labels because now they're put on the back burner.
Yeah. You don't have that buying power.
Having, it's just pretty much like indie rock. It's we're always just trying to figure out how to survive. It's kind of like the DIY punk thing, man. It's we really are in ourselves, and we got to figure out how to make this happen and do it. So, I mean, I'm sure we'll figure it out again.
Let's get back to the record. So, Truth or Consequences, I read a few articles on the record. I think that you maybe did some interview for. This record seems very personal to you. You said these songs were about specific points in your life.
Yeah, it's Unwed Sailor, it's weird because I'll write these songs and then they kind of morph into what they are. And a lot of times when I'm writing them, I don't, I know that it's a part of me and I know that I'm expressing myself, but I don't know a specific direction it might be, a certain theme or a subject. And a lot of times after the song is released and I've heard it and it's kind of not been put to bed, but just kind of tucked into its spot, it's into the world, I kind of start realizing what things are about. They kind of reveal themselves to me. So, you have a song like Palladora on the record, and that's about my dad, my grandpa dad, who raised me, and about him growing up and kind of basically working his ass off to get somewhere and become a successful person and, living his dream and what he wants to do. And I named it Palladora because that was this really crappy apartment complex that he lived in. and when he was just reading gas meters, like sweating every day. So, there's stuff like that kind of like, it kind of reveals itself to me, like what it is. Then you have a song on the record like Fell's Way, which is like this little kind of guitar interlude that actually no one in the band played. This guy, Vince Griffin, he's an amazing guitar player. He submitted this little acoustic guitar part for the song Truth or Consequences. And I didn't really like the way it sounded in the song. But when we were listening to it as its own, it was just, I loved it so much. It was so beautiful. So I kind of just assigned a meaning to that one. But it's called Fell's Way. And Fell's Way was the first band that I was in when I moved to Seattle in the 90s. Oh. And it was the first time as a bass player that I really felt what it was like to write music with a group of people and just feel that exhilaration and that magic. Like, whoa, I just hit a note that totally worked with the guitar player and the drummer hit at the same time, and it just all works. And Fell's Way was that band for me. And the way that song sounds, there's like this innocent kind of hopefulness to it. So I assigned Fell's Way to that. So yeah. And then of course, Voodoo Roo, the song on Truth or Consequences, is just straight up about my cat, Voodoo Roo. And she makes an appearance at the end. She does a vocal at the very end. So yeah.
I was listening to it today, and then when it got to that part where I was like, is that my cat? And I looked around and was like, oh no, it's in the song.
Yeah, that's Voodoo. What would happen is I would, there was a certain period where I was in my room a lot writing bass lines and recording them on my phone. And I was writing Voodoo Roo, and at the end, she just jumped up on my bed and meowed. And I caught that on my iPhone recording of it. So it's like, okay, it's Voodoo Roo. The song is yours.
Since the music is instrumental, you said you kind of apply meaning to them more after the fact. Is that just from like a mood or like a feeling you get from listening to it? Or is it a little bit more involved than that?
It's something I don't really understand. Unwed Sailor is a weird thing where a lot of this comes to me. Like, I don't really go after it necessarily, like the meaning and mood. Like, I'll pick my bass up, carry it across the room, and kind of start playing something. And I'm like, oh, I like that. Okay, I'm going to sit down and mess with that. And then an hour later, I have this whole bass structure and melody. So a lot of it just comes to me, and I don't really know exactly what I'm doing a lot of time. I just kind of allow it to happen. And I'm a very nostalgic person, so I think I'm really susceptible to like feeling things. You know what I mean? So just ideas and moods, they come to me very easily. But if I'm ever like on the search, okay, I got to sit down and write a song. Okay, I've got to find, okay, what kind of mood do I want? Or what's this going to be about? It just does not work. I don't even attempt to do that because it just goes against my nature.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach. Dylan, you write songs. But you also write lyrics too, so I'm assuming that's
and
it's a little more direct with what it's going for.
Yeah, but it's interesting hearing you talk about how I've heard and I've heard other musicians talk about writing music that way, and I feel the complete opposite. Like I do exactly what you say of like, okay, I need to write a song that's like this. Like I need to have this specific like mood that I'm going for, and like and I piece it together more that way rather than. I mean, I'm not immune to being struck by a good musical idea, but I very rarely start writing on the guitar. That's usually I start with words usually. So if I get a really good riff, then I struggle to be like, what do I do with it?
Right. Well, and again, since I never sit down to write, it really is if I'm picking up my bass to move it across the room, and you just start playing your guitar if you pick it up.
Yeah.
Or if I'm in the studio and we're setting up mics and I'm just picking up my bass to do something, and an idea will happen. So, and that's just how it works for me. So I have to like trust that and be true to it and not like defile it. It's like, okay, well, this is how this works. So that's how that relationship's going to be. I'm not, because I don't want those ideas to stop coming to me. Every songwriter's worst nightmare, where you can't write anything anymore. So yeah, I'm thankful for it, man. And I feel like since the Heavy Age record around 2019, 2018, something has clicked in my brain where I'm able to write easier. It just flows better. Like I know if I'm writing a part, like I pretty much know, okay, this is like the next, I hear the melody in my head. So I'm like, oh, that's where I need to go. I got to find that. So yeah, man, I've just been really fortunate to have just lots of ideas coming to me these past 3-4 years or so, which I think has been why, we've done a record a year. And the record that's coming out next year, we've already got pretty much done. We're working on some mastering stuff and everything. But so I feel great because, I'm a musician and I love music. It's what I do. So I've had this opportunity to just keep writing these songs and keep putting them out. And, so I can't ask for anything more than that.
I was going to ask because I noticed, like, looking at the Unwed Sailor discography, I was like, yeah, it's okay. Kind of sporadic the way most bands are. Like, there's a skip 2 years, here's a record, and then, there's a solid EP the year after that. But then I noticed that I was like, the last 3 years, you've had an album every single year. And now a fourth coming up for next year. And so it's like, I was going to ask, like, what changed to have this, like, increased, output? But it sounds like it's a mystery.
Yeah, there was something that inspired me was we were on tour in Seattle, and I was hanging out with Dave Bazan from Pedro the Lion, and we always get together and talk and like throw ideas around and just be buddies and hang out. And we were just talking about releasing records, and we were talking about the idea of releasing a record every year. And is that possible? How do you do that? And that conversation really inspired me. And it made me think, well, I'm a musician. This is what I do. I love writing music. It's who I am. So why am I not putting out a record every year? It's like that. This is what I should be doing. You only live for so long. So release as much as you can. And so that's kind of, that was an inspiration to me. And then, so once I started getting that mindset, that maybe that helped trigger just the productivity in the writing. And I think too, once you start getting on a roll and realize, man, I'm like doing this, like I'm really doing this, it kind of gives you even more like fuel to keep going.
That's an interesting philosophy to take, because a lot of times bands, they'll sit on material, or they'll work on it for a really long time, or either they're trying to like follow some like album cycle rule that record labels want to have, or if it's like, well, we got a tour here, so we shouldn't worry too much about writing. But yeah, it is. Music is a full-time job for you, so like, why not? I mean, it used to be like bands would release 2 or 3 records a year, like in like the 60s,
Now that I don't know, that maybe that's the step or the next goal. But no, I write, like I'm writing a lot of songs that aren't, I wrote songs during the Truth or Consequences period that aren't on Truth or Consequences. So I'm writing songs that aren't on these new records I'm releasing. So, so I've got more like in the closet, that I'm like pulling out to release. And, some of them are just little bass ideas, like a 4-second thing. Some of them are like whole like structures. So yeah, and when I'm doing a record, I'll kind of look through what I have, and whatever starts jumping out at me and starts making sense with each other, I'll start putting those together as, the album structure. And then, the album just starts being born.
That's nice. So you're like creating like a library of songs, and then you can pick and choose and curate a collection.
Exactly. Yep, exactly.
That's cool.
That way you don't get too many songs sounding like alike, or like every song is slow or every song is fast. you can kind of like create like the little soundtrack, like little movie soundtracks,
Yeah. Plus, instrumental music, you're not necessarily beholden to like a song structure either. So you're definitely able to go down any rabbit hole musically that, or groove on something longer than, well, we need a verse here, someone else would have to do.
Yeah.
You don't have to
Well,
get to the chorus.
it's weird too on Truth or Consequences. Like, there's a couple songs on there that really they surprised me because like we had never really written anything like those. Like the song Ajo, which is kind of like this weird, funky ambient song with like whale sounds at the end. It's just was so like when that song started like creating itself, I was like, what is this? Like, I don't know where this is coming from. I mean, I really like it, but I don't really understand it right now, And I was actually a little insecure about it. Like the bass line is so like funky and like dopey. and I remember Matt Putman, who plays drums in Unwed. I remember asking him, I'm like, is this just dumb? I mean, should we use this? He's like, yeah, man, just trust in it. It came out, so let's use it. And then the song Lilith was another example of that, where it's just probably the weirdest bass line I've ever written. I mean, it's just like a solo, not like a Steve Vai solo or something, but it's like this weird, like whimsical, happy solo that sounds almost like, it would be playing on the It's a Small World ride or something. Like it was like, well, what am I going to do with this? And then so we get in there and Matt starts playing this like, this beat that, you would hear like on Tusk, like Fleetwood Mac or something. And it just turns into this thing, it's like, what is that? Like, there's no other Unwed Sailor song like it. So it's cool. Like sometimes it surprises you too,
Yeah. Listening to the record, like all the songs you mentioned were also the ones that like, I'm listening to it on my phone and I don't necessarily always know the name of every song, but like naming those specific songs, I'm like, yeah, I remember looking at my phone to see what the name of this track was because it stood out in the progression of the record.
Yeah, it's like they really do. They stand out, I think, in the entire catalog. Like they're just kind of strange and their own little worlds. But I welcome that. I welcome those weird little songs that, they're kind of orphans, they're not going to have any like company because they're so weird. They're just kind of these little songs that are just going to have their own space and nothing else is going to really sound like them again.
Who was the lineup on this record? You mentioned Matt Putman.
Yeah, Matt Putman. Dave Swatzel plays guitar, and he's been with Unwed Sailor ever since the Heavy Age record. Vince Griffin did the Fells Way. Mike Adams from Mike Adams at His Honest Weight.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he played some guitar and keyboards on the song Palladora, actually. I went up to Bloomington, Indiana, where he lives, to do some tracking and mixing. And I just asked Mike if he would take a couple days off and hang out in the studio and, write some stuff with me and play on the record. And so he did. So I'm a big Mike Adams, so it was awesome to have him in the studio.
That's awesome. Yeah, I noticed that every record seems to have like slightly different lineups. I was just curious who was on this one. It's out on Spartan Records. Is this the first time you've worked with them?
Yep. This is the first record with Spartan, and I've loved it, man. I had some people I knew even back on the Heavy Age record. They were like, "Hey, you should talk to Spartan Records about putting something out." And I just kept hearing it enough where I thought, well, maybe I should check it out. And a mutual friend of John and I's kind of set up a phone conversation, and we started talking, and it just, we clicked. Everything felt right. And I know John is really passionate about his releases, and he throws 100% of himself into everything he releases. And that's what I do with every album I write and put out. So it's a good pairing, and we become good friends, and we talk all the time now. And I'm going to be up in Seattle next week, so we're going to get to meet in person for the first time, which will be cool. But yeah, man, I love working with Spartan. And he's set to release the next record next year as well. And we also got a little special surprise. I can't say the word that it is because it'll give it away, but we got a special surprise release coming this fall on Spartan as well. So yeah, man, the wheels are turning. We're on the phone every day, like doing stuff and making plans.
That's awesome. Yeah, they're definitely more and more. I've noticed the stuff they've put out more and more. Like I became aware of them when they started doing those Sensefield reissues a couple years ago, And then maybe when that Young Fox record came out, that's probably the first time I heard about Spartan. But yeah, every year they seem to get a little bigger, so which is really awesome.
Well, a big thing for me was, that Giants Chair record they put out.
Mhm.
That I was super excited about that because, I'm a longtime Giants Chair fan back from the 90s. They did that Farewell Bend reissue, which is dudes from Giants Chair and Boys Life.
Mhm.
In Assertion, William Goldsmith's new band. Yeah, there's just a lot of stuff that he's doing that I'm into and super stoked about. The Chris Simpson stuff, Mountain Time stuff is great. So yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of good company on that label.
Yeah. And I guess I want to touch a little bit. We won't go too long on like your earlier bands because Unwed Sailor is the current living project that you're working with. But you're most notably prior known for Roadside Monument and probably playing with Pedro the Lion. But, there's like half a dozen other bands too that you're also involved with, of course. Has the enduring fandom of those bands surprised you over the years? Because it seems never ending. The amount of people who are just like, I love Roadside Monument.
Well, for Roadside's probably maybe a little bit surprising because, when we were actively doing that, it was always an uphill battle. It was a fight constantly. Nobody cared about us, So, so many shows we'd be playing somewhere to the bartender and that was it. So, we loved what we did and we were 110% into what we were doing and we were willing to to bleed for it, maybe even die for it. Sometimes like some of the vans we drove around in, but, yeah, man, so, when you experience that kind of thing, when you're actually doing it, and then 20 years later, there's some like diehard fans out there, that are going to pay $300 for your 8 hours away from being a man pressing on vinyl, you're like, wow, really?
Is that how much it's going for now?
It seems like pretty high every time I check. I might have just inflated the price a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's a little surprising, but at the same time, man, it's like, Matt, Doug, and I really, really believed and still believe in that music. So in a way, it doesn't surprise me because we really put our heart and soul into that band, and I'm really proud of all those. So yeah, it's good music. I think people should like it and appreciate it. So yeah, and I still love Roadside Monument so much. And for Pedro the Lion, man, Dave Bazan he's just a master songwriter and such an open book and an honest person. When I first met Dave and I was first hearing Dave play these Pedro the Lion songs, I was like, of course. This is timeless music. These are songs that will go down in history as being some of the best songs ever written. Yeah, they're just incredible songs that so many people have like found themselves in. So yeah, that Dave doesn't surprise me because I knew when I heard that, like, okay, this guy is like got some so yeah, when he asked me to play on the it's hard to find a friend record, I was like, yeah. And I remember, we both lived in Seattle and he had a really strong like this work ethic where he wanted to start recording like 7 or 8 a.m. Like it was like a job, like you showed up to work and then we have lunch and then we're off, later in the day. So I remember taking a bus every morning, like at 7 a.m. with my bass, getting on the bus, taking the bus to his house, then we start working on the record. Like it was, it was like 9 to 5 thing, but it was worth it to me, man. I was like, I know that I right now am part of something that is going to go down in the history books. It was such a great, the songs were so great. And I was just so thankful to be a part of it. And then, later on, I played on the Control tour for the Pedro the Lion Control record. And at that time, Dave had another bass player lined up for that tour. And I remember calling Dave and saying, dude, I'm sorry, man, but you got to fire that bass player, dude, because I am playing bass. Because he had like sent me demos for Control. And I was in the studio when he was recording that record. So I was hearing this and I was like, dude, this is so epic. This record is going to change everything. So, I was like, I have got to play this tour. I will not take no for an answer. And I got to play bass on tour. And what made it even better is the tour was with Damien Jurado on his I Break Chairs tour, which was, a record that he did where he just went total rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great
Like
record.
Dylan with the band.
Yeah.
And T.W. Walsh was on that tour. So I got to play bass for all three of them. So, that was one of the best months of my life. Like, no question. It was amazing. And too, Damien during that time with the I Break Chairs record, I feel like, it was just so live. It was just so loud and in your face. And I really felt like I was getting the sense from Damien that he almost saw it like it was like Black Flag or something. Like it, because there would be times where he would throw his guitar off and just be screaming into the microphone, like laying on his back, rolling around on the stage. And I was like, man, am I in Black Flag? I mean, is that Henry Rollins over there, So it was just such a cool time because, Control was a heavy record. I Break Chairs was a heavy record. And T.W. Walsh, our live set was really heavy. So it was just such a cool era for all those bands. And I'm just, I pinch myself that I got to be a part of it.
Yeah, your name is on a lot of records from that time period too, or just like in lineups from like live shows that I was always just a huge fan of a lot of those bands. So it's really awesome to like see the career that you've had.
Well, I always tried to jump in there too. During that era, I moved to Seattle from Oklahoma because I wanted to play music, and that was my target. I just wanted to be in a band. I wanted to play music. I wanted to write songs. I wanted to go on tour. And I wanted that to be my life. So once I was able to get up into a city like Seattle in the 90s with that kind of creative bed just bubbling all the time, I just dove in, man. I was like, and I made friends so fast, because that scene up there. And so, like 90 Pound Wuss or something, A Meager Diet of Self-Interest. I think that was the record.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were recording. So I was like, Jeff, can I come sing on the record? And he's like, yeah, man, come on. So, and they're recording it at Robert Lang Studios, which is, legendary studio up in Seattle. So yeah, man, I get to get in there and scream into a microphone and be on their record, and they're my buddies. So it's like, yeah, I mean, it was just such a beautiful time because everyone was supporting each other. And, you'd wake up one morning and, you were living with like 5 or 6 people, and half of them are recording a record somewhere. So you just jump in the car and go with them, and you end up on the record. Yeah. So it was just such a creative time. I really miss it, to be honest. It was probably the best years of my life, spending time in Seattle during that era.
What is Tulsa's music scene like for you? I know it's very different.
Yeah, it's not really up my alley, man. As just some dude who plays instrumental music, I don't really fit in with Leon Russell and like Eric Clapton or that which I mean, there's a lot of bands kind of like doing like the whole 70s country rock thing, which is great, and I'm a fan. The 70s outlaw country movement. I grew up around that stuff, so I'm a huge fan, but I'm not really interested so much in newer bands doing it. But it's a vibrant scene. I mean, there's a lot of that happening. And then, on the other hand, you have kind of like the garage punk kind of stuff happening, which I appreciate it, but it's not what I'm listening to every day, So I kind of, I keep to myself mostly, honestly, and just kind of hang out here with my cats and write music and read books and listen to records, and just I'm kind of, I guess, my own party here or something in the house. But I'm 47 too, man. You know what I mean? It's like, if a show comes through town, like we have a great venue here called Kane's Ballroom that's just a mile from my house. It's been around since the 20s, and it's the only venue still standing that the Sex Pistols played on their U.S. tour. But like Van Halen played there in the early days. The Police played there, like an opening slot for some band. It's just a legendary venue. So there's been back when Sonic Youth was around, they played there. So I saw that. Yola Tingo played there. stuff like that. I mean, I'll always go and see that. But other than that, I'm usually like in the house, hanging out.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Does Unwed Sailor have any plans for the rest of the year, or are you going to keep it kind of quiet, wait and see?
Well, we're announcing some tour dates
Nice.
later this week for the fall. So that'll be good to finally get back out on the road, and hopefully I remember how to do that. Doing that, we're working on some mixes and some mastering stuff. We're doing more recording in July. I'm working with some other artists. That's kind of a surprise thing that'll be coming up. I'm not sure when, but that's got some stuff in the works there. So yeah, it's definitely busy. When I say all I do is hang out in my house with my cats, it's not really true. Like, I honestly don't really have time to go out and be a part of a Tulsa music scene because I'm doing so much other stuff. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I highly recommend everyone go listen to Truth and Consequences right now. It's listening to it today. Like, I listened to it when it first came out in May, and then I listened to it again today to get ready for the show, and I was just like, God, I think it's some of your best material under the Unwed Sailor name for sure. I really love the record. It's really good.
Well, I will say this. I feel like I've got we've got a little magic trio going. Like Dave Swatzel plays guitar, started playing on the Heavy Age record, and he's been with the band ever since. And we just write so well together. And he was an Unwed fan before he joined the band. So having him, his contributions to the music really, really amplifies the songs. And then, of course, Matt Putman, longtime drummer, he's like the backbone. And, he just, so us three together, we just, it clicks really well. And we're just really able to realize this thing, through each other. So I want to give them props.
Absolutely. Yeah, Matt Putman, he shows up on everywhere.
Dude, I think he's one of my favorite drummers of all time. I mean, and I think he one of the most creative drummers I've ever heard, definitely worked with. I mean, the guy is a percussion master. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we for our record coming out next year, we did a lot of percussion on it, and we just spent like a whole day on percussion. And I was just sitting back on the couch listening to this guy, and I'm like, wait, is that like a computer or is that a human? But the guy is so on. Like, he was doing like triangle stuff, and like his shakers are just, it's like a mechanical like robot. He's just so like precise with everything. So I obviously, like, sitting in a room and watching him play percussion is like as good as watching him play drums. Like, it's pretty incredible.
Well, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing some of that. That sounds really fun. I guess we can get into the rest of the format of the show if you're ready.
Sure.
All right. The premise of our show is we assign our guests a year, and they choose one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk adjacent album from that year for us to talk about. So for this week's episode, we gave you 1985. And before we get into the album you chose to talk about today, what are some other records that came out that year that you almost picked or you considered picking? You mentioned one off the top.
Yes, I do not have the list in front of me, but one where I got about 6 pages into the list, pretty far in, is this band called Diff Juz. That's DIFJUZ, 2 words. They were a 4AD band in the 80s. And instrumental band. So I had no idea this band existed, but I'm a 4AD fan, especially in that era, 80s and 90s. So I was digging, at a record store, digging around through records, and I see this record, and it's by a band called Diff Juz, and the name of the record is Extractions, and it's got a total 4AD album code. So I'm like, I wonder, is this on 4AD? So I flip it over, like, yep, it's on 4AD. And I'm like, this is really cool looking. I was like, is this like a Cocteau Twins record, or is that kind of thing? And so I took it home and listened to it, and I was like, whoa, this is like an instrumental band. I've never heard of this. And they're totally unique in the music that they write. Some people could say it's kind of jazzy, but I don't, when I listen to jazz, me personally, I don't usually hear a lot of melodies or hooks. And with Diff Juzz, it's just all I hear is hooks and the guitars, like these little melodies that just grab you. And it's like the music just rolls along in all these weird patterns, and so I guess that is kind of the jazz element of it. And Elizabeth Fraser sings on the record from the Cocteau Twins. So I was just blown away by this record, and it became a big influence on me. And it was produced by Robin Guthrie from the Cocteau Twins. So yeah, it just blew my mind, man. I couldn't believe I'd never heard of this band. It was just one of those weird, obscure 4AD bands that, just never really like broke through. And Simon Raymond from the Cocteau Twins, I guess they took Diff Juzz out on tour with them a few times. And Simon had said that they were one of the best bands he's ever seen. So I kind of went down a rabbit hole. I went on YouTube, and they actually have like a music video, and they just look so cool in the video. I mean, they're just like, and the way the video looks, and so they just became later in my life, they became this like really important band that I can say they're one of my favorite bands, which is kind of rare, later in life when you actually find those that just totally change your way of thinking and change your life musically. So yeah, Diff Juzz was, and when I saw that, I was like, okay, that's my record. That's my 1985 record. But I could not deny the other one that was on the front page,
right.
like in the top 5 or whatever, which is New Order, Low Life. And New Order, I've said so many times, is my favorite band of all time. Another life-changing band. This time as a preteen, I guess. New Order just checked every box for me, and they always have. Ever since the first time I heard them, they inspire me more than any other band. Peter Hook, the bass player of New Order, has inspired my bass playing more than anything else. And I'm sure if you listen, you don't even have to listen close to my bass playing to hear Peter Hook in it, I feel. But so yeah, Low Life, man. Not my favorite New Order record, but still, I think every New Order record is a 10. Like no New Order record is below a 10 in my book. But it's the first New Order record where the band is actually on the cover, like photos of and Stephen Morris, the drummer, made the cover, which is funny, like the drummer's on the cover.
He's the default cover, yeah, because it's like an interchangeable cover, I think is.
Yes, yeah. But every time I've seen it released in the store or when I pick it up, he's always there on the cover. So yeah, Love Vigilantes, the first song. I mean, one of my favorite New Order songs. Just so sad, about the guy going off to war, loves his wife, misses his wife every day, flies back, all excited to see her. She opens the door, her jaw hits the floor, she shows him the letter that says that he died, so she thought he was dead the whole time. Just amazing song. The Perfect Kiss, one of my favorite New Order moments of all time with the frogs keyboard sound. Like there, I was listening to the record to listen today before the podcast, and I just, that frog part, and I was listening to it and I was like, I feel like when I die, when I'm taking my last breath, and whatever happens when you die, I feel like I'm going to hear that part in the song. Like, it's just this, like, it's such a comforting part to me. And I think it comes from me growing up, as being 13 or 12 or whatever, and hearing that part so many times. It's just like a blanket for me, like the way the synth sounds and the frogs, and it just makes me feel safe when I hear that section of the song. I just love it so much. And I mean, dude, New Order, man. I mean, just every record they've released has just been so important to me. And even now, without Peter Hook in the band, I still think their records are good. And I'm still a diehard Peter Hook fan. I'll always go see him with his Peter Hook and the Light band when they come through town. But so yeah, that's New Order, man. And it's pretty much any year you give me, New Order puts out a record that year, I'm gonna pick it. So, but Diff Juzz was creeping up. I mean, it's I mean, it's an important record for me too. So I would say both these albums and bands were and are hugely influential to me. as a bass player, as a musician, and to, New Order being my favorite band of all time, and Diff Juz being one of my favorite band of all time.
So I'm definitely going to listen to that Diff Juz record now because the way you talked about it, it sounds so interesting. I like Cocteau Twins as well. So like, I'm definitely going to look into that for sure.
And another weird little fact about this Diff Juz record, you'll notice instantly. Well, the first song, Love Insane, is it might kind of throw you off because it's kind of this ambient saxophone song that's 8 minutes long. So it's like, okay, it's cool, but it's not preparing for you for what's about to happen and the rest of the record. So I'm wondering if a lot of people bought this and heard that, and then, they, 4AD fan likes kind of darker, ambient, weird stuff, and they probably liked it, but maybe they were like, okay, this isn't going anywhere, and turned it off. But one thing you'll notice is the drums are mixed really low in the mix. They're really tiny, and the guitars are what sit high in the bass. But a lot of times the bass doesn't have a lot of low end to the recording, so the bass you can't tell if maybe the bass is a guitar too. It's a really, really strangely mixed record. And it kind of makes sense because, Robert Guthrie produced it, and he's just, the Cocteau Twins are just such a one-of-a-kind, strange band in the way they sound too, even recorded. But I've always wondered what Diff Juz would sound like if they went in and remixed it and turned the drums up and made it a little more rock instead of less ambient. I have always wondered how that would sound. But I'm just preparing you for some of those little things that you're going to hear on the record.
I'm definitely looking forward to trying that out. If anyone is interested in what else came out in 1985, we recommend everybody go over to our Patreon, where Dylan and I will do a little bit of a deep dive on the other albums that came out that year. But let's get into Lowlife. New Order, Lowlife. I got a couple stats on the album, too. They formed in Manchester, England in 1980 after the death of Ian Curtis. The rest of the members, most people know this, but in case you're new to New Order, the rest of the members were in Joy Division along with Ian Curtis and decided to form a new band because of an earlier agreement that if anyone ever left Joy Division, they would start a new band. This is released on May 13th, 1985 on Factory Records. This is their third album, and it's released between Power, Corruption, and Lies and the album Brotherhood. And the person on this record is Bernard Sumner on vocals and guitar, Peter Hook on bass, Stephen Morris on drums, and Gillian Gilbert on keys. But also everyone else also plays keys. So the record was produced by the band themselves. Their very first record, I think, is the one where they had a producer, and then they basically just learned how to produce a record from there, and then they did the rest by themselves. You kind of already answered the question I usually ask first, which is like, what made you choose this album specifically? But you answered it by saying New Order, one of your all-time favorite bands. So
my all-time favorite, number one.
Right.
Number one spot.
So I'm going to move over to Dylan and ask New Order thoughts prior to listening to this record. Were you already familiar with this record?
Yeah. I really enjoy what I have listened to of New Order. I really love their record right before this, Power, Corruption, and Lies, especially. That's been a record I've really enjoyed for many years. I haven't spent much time with this record in particular, but I listened to it. When you told me what record we were going to talk about, like my first reaction was like, oh, good, one I already like. Like there's not any work to really put into this record. I could really just listen to it and kind of refresh my memory of it. So, yeah, this is an interesting record to put into the context of their career, which is something that I hadn't really done. Like I thought, I knew it was their third record in the past, but I didn't really think about what exactly that meant. But this is kind of really that turning point of their dance-oriented sound, because the first two records are definitely much more, I would call, post-punk. And I would still call this a post-punk record, but there's such an emphasis on a dance beat pretty consistently through the record, which is, it's really cool to see them at this kind of really balanced point in between their more Joy Division-y, history, background, and then what they would turn into. So, but yeah, I like this record a lot, and I pretty much knew that going into it.
So for me, I had out of the first 5 records, this by New Order, this was the only one I hadn't heard for some reason. So like I'd heard, the first 2, and then I'd heard Brotherhood, and the 5th one, I'm blanking on the title of it right now. It's the bright colorful one, the purple magenta one. Regardless. So this was my first time actually listening to Lowlife, because I somehow missed it. I don't know why. Probably some whatever rubric or what made me decide what to listen to that day, picked another record. But before listening to this, I would have said Power and Corruption was probably my favorite New Order record I'd heard. But listening to this one, I think this is my favorite New Order record I've heard, which I think there's some discussion as far as I've read online about what is the best New Order record. I think generally Power, Corruption, and Lies is viewed as the best, but there's also argument to be made about this one being up there as well. Jonathan, you mentioned that this one's not your favorite New Order record, but what is?
Well, I would say it's probably a runner-up. My first New Order record was Substance, the singles collection.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say Technique would probably be my favorite real New Order record, or not real, but proper New Order record. But Substance will always be that record where it's like, whoa, like that's the one that really made the introduction for me.
That's like with the Buzzcocks for a lot of people. Like Singles Going Steady is like a lot of people's introduction to that band, and it's technically a compilation, but they're also not collected anywhere else. So they were just loose singles. So. Yeah, it's not a true album per se, as in it wasn't all recorded at the same time. But what really makes an album? Is it that? I'm sure.
Yeah, for a while there, their record Republic with the Regret, the big single Regret single, which is probably my favorite New Order song, and that's such a difficult record because it starts with Regret. Which might be the greatest New Order song of all time. And then it just goes, the rest of the record, it almost sounds like Bernard Sumner just kind of wrote a solo record in a way. But I really dove into that a couple years ago because I really wanted to dig into that record and make it a part of me to where I really understood it. And it became one of my favorite New Order records once I really dove in. But I know if you read Peter Hook's autobiography, he's really down on that record, because he was feeling kind of shut out of the band at that time. And Bernard was kind of just controlling everything. But I love that record now. It's a total dance record. It almost, it's almost more like the Pet Shop Boys or something, And if you listen to the electronic record with Bernard and Johnny Marr, it's similar to the Republic record. It's just way more dancey than the New Order rock,
Yeah, this album does feature, because I was reading a little bit about the reception to this record, or the prior expectations of it, and it was considered the first New Order record where there were expectations, because with the first record everyone was just didn't really expect much, because or they didn't have a specific expectation set in mind, just because of what had just happened with Joy Division. So Power of Corruption comes out and then blows everyone away. So then it became, when this record came out, I was like, what is this going to do? What is how different is it going to be? Is it going to be more of the same? And they seem to embrace a little more of a pop side on this one, especially with the lead single, The Perfect Kiss, which have either of you watched the music video for that one?
It's been a while since I've seen.
That's the Johnathan Demme video, right? Yeah.
It's the Johnathan Demme video. I watched it today because I'd never seen the video, and it's one of the most mesmerizing videos I've ever seen because it's very minimal in the sense that like the entire video is like these up close shots of basically their faces, and then it'll cut to like their hands as they're playing their instrument, but like you only get like a handful of shots throughout the entire video of them like full body playing. Like there's a couple shots of Peter Hook playing his bass and like he has his leather jacket and looks a little like Kurt Russell in Escape from New York and without an eye patch. But like there's only a couple shots of full body and most of it's just kind of like this static shot on like their faces as they're playing. And it's one of the most amazing videos I've ever seen. Johnathan Demme, phenomenal director. You know, his Talking Heads concert film is the exact opposite in that it's like elaborate and lots of moving pieces and costumes and set design stuff. So, but go out of if you're listening to this, go out of your way and watch the video because you'll be hooked just watching Peter Hook.
They looked really cool. Like that adds a lot to it. And they just have like that. They have this kind of subtle mystique in that video. Like they're just they look like normal people, but like normal cool people. Like it's this really weird contrast. And yeah, it's totally just like these super close up shots, but it's 9 minutes long, right?
Yeah.
Like. Which was the original version of the song was 9 minutes. They cut it down for the record.
You know, it's funny too. I feel like Peter Hook's the guy that can like pull off a leather jacket, a ponytail, and sweatpants, and like make it look kind of cool. You know, I don't even think he had a shirt on under the leather jacket. Actually,
watching the video and like seeing how he played, I didn't realize that like how much of what I assumed was the guitar was actually the bass on that song.
Especially when he's playing the 6-string, like the bass 6, which is like, you know, a bass guitar / guitar. It's kind of like the middle ground. When he's playing that, it's really hard to tell, like, what is the actual guitar and what is the bass.
Yeah, he provides really kind of the main melody, I feel like, for a lot of their songs.
Yeah,
like
the hooks, man.
Some of the most memorable melodies that I can think of, like instrumental melodies, are his bass playing, and it's all that he goes way up high and he just plays these nice, pretty melodies. It's totally different expectation than what you expect of a bass player in a post-punk band, especially.
And they're so simple too. That's what I also love about them. It's just how simple they are.
Do you have any favorite tracks? Like, do you have any specific tracks on here that you would earmark as favorite on this record?
On Low Life?
Mm-hmm.
Those two that I mentioned, Love Vigilantes and The Perfect Kiss, for sure. You know, one, actually, this song Face Up, which is the last song on the record,
Yeah.
is a song that I tend to forget about with New Order. Maybe because it's just at the end of that record. But man, I mean, it is like a hit, man. It's so catchy. It's as catchy as Love Vigilantes or like Regret, you know? I mean, I think since it's just at the end of the record, you kind of forget about it. But when I was listening today, I was like, wow, like Face Up, like that's just not a song I think about that often, but it's like listening to this record right now, it's becoming one of my favorites on the record.
Yeah, I didn't notice it. I listened to this record twice for for recording this episode, and have listened to it in the past, but I didn't really notice it the first time through. And I feel like this record kind of has a little bit of a sequencing issue as far as the way where the songs are on the record. Like, and I think it's also it's weird because the Perfect Kiss is a great single, but the other big single from this record or the only other single from this record is Subculture, which I thought was a really odd choice to release as a single.
Yeah, and not Love Vigilantes.
Right. And even if you could condense Sunrise, that would be a killer single as well. A radio edit, maybe, you know? But I thought Face Up is unfairly like buried at the very end of the record because you kind of get through those first 4 tracks, I think, and then Elegia is, I think, poorly edited because and out of place because I feel like it's the weird outlier that kind of got looped in because they had the material. I was reading about the record, and this song in particular was originally Elegia was originally like I want to say like a 17-minute song that they had composed for a soundtrack, but then it didn't get used for the soundtrack. The film didn't come out, so then they had it and they were like, well, let's cut it down and make it fit on the record. And to me it really throws off the whole back half.
It's almost more of like a Power, Corruption, and Lies.
Yeah,
like it'd be on that record.
It would make more sense as a moodier, darker piece among other moody, darker pieces. Whereas most of this record is like dance beat, bright melodies.
Yeah, I personally think it's the weakest track on the album. Just because it does. It sounds so different. They described it as like their Ennio Morricone like track, which I need to listen to the extended, like the full 17-minute version. I think it exists, I believe.
I think they actually reissued that on vinyl a few years ago as a 12-inch.
Okay.
I need to hear that full piece to see if that works better as the full, movement than as just like a trimmed down version for the record.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think it's poorly edited. I think that it sounds more, because before I knew that it was written to be a score, I was listening to it. I was like, this sounds like movie soundtrack music, but not like the theme of a film, more like the mid-film dramatic, like suspenseful, broken apart version of the theme, where you get that little bit of that melody, but it doesn't hit you the way you want it to, like, and it's more for the suspense. So I feel like, yeah, I definitely should listen to the extended version to see how it builds up.
I do disagree with the sequencing complaint you have, though. To me, this album feels kind of bookended. Like, so you have the two amazing Love Vigilantes and The Perfect Kiss right at the top, and then I think Subculture and Face Up are like equally as good as the first 2 tracks. And so like they kind of bookends, the record. It puts Elegia in the middle, kind of. There's not an even number of tracks there to make that to work, but yeah, to me it's like a mirror, or like a mirror. Like you're reflecting, like the strongest points are on the outside, and it gets weaker towards the center. But that's not to say that Sunrise or Sooner Than You Think are bad songs. They're just maybe not as immediately grabbing as Perfect Kiss or Subculture is.
Yeah, it does seem like it starts bright, kind of dips down through the middle, gets a little dark, and then at the end it like pops out again as bright. It's like the arc, kind of the movie arc, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Face Up is like the poppiest, but the most upbeat track on the record, even to me.
Yeah, I love that. Love that song.
Mm-hmm.
But it might be one of the most hateful lyrically, though. You know what I mean? But that's one thing I love about New Order. Like some of the lyrics are really hateful and kind of like angry, like, but it's like a total pop song.
Yeah, what is he?
It's like, oh, I cannot stand the thought of you. Or,
I was reading an article. I think it was like a Quietus like anniversary piece on this record, and I want to say there was like even at this point in the band, Bernard and Peter weren't really getting along that well. Like he was.
I wonder if they ever did, honestly.
Mm.
I mean, I think they probably loved each other like brothers, but never. But there was always tension there. At least if you read their books, you feel that you get that. Like it seems like Peter has a real fondness for Bernard, like and wishes so much that it could work, but it just doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bernard almost seems like he's just like oblivious to Peter's fondness. It just is kind of like, you know what I mean, kind of a cold shoulder kind of thing. It's more he's more subdued and more like collected, and Peter's kind of more of an emotional, you know, Peter would tell Bernard that he loved him, and like Bernard would love him but turn his back on him because he wanted to appear subdued or something. That's just the vibe I get a little bit.
Can't show any weakness.
My head, you know, how I picture them interacting or whatever. It could be, I could totally be wrong. It could be the complete opposite, but it's just kind of how I picture it in my head.
Well, like, and also like Steven and Jillian, they kind of have each other. They're a unit within the band too, since they're together. Are they still together? I mean, they had children together.
Oh yeah,
so.
yeah.
But she also got to step out of the band for a good 10-year period too. Probably when it was at its most stressful too, I imagine. Yeah. So like sorry.
Oh yeah, you should check. I mean, pretty much. I mean, everyone in the band except Gillian has autobiographies that you can read. I mean, Steven has 2, part 1 and part 2. And I've read all of them. So you can kind of get an idea of all their different perspectives and how they interacted. And it's pretty great. I mean, Peter Hooks is my favorite for sure. And, you know, he wrote 3 books. He wrote the New Order book, Joy Division book, and then he wrote one on the Hacienda.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all so good. I just wish he would keep writing books because they're so good.
That's interesting. I can't think of any other band that we've ever talked about on this show that most of the members have written a book about their music and their lives.
Yeah. Stephen Morris's second book just came out fairly recently. I finished it, a couple months ago or something. But yeah, they're all great. And they're my favorite band ever. So I'll eat up whatever they put out.
This record is in that book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die, which is impressive that one specifically made the cut, because honestly it does seem like Power and Corruption is the one that you assign to a new listener. Start here, this is the one to start with. Well,
there might be a few New Order records on that list.
It could be. I don't know if that book has any rules against multiple. Probably not. With 1001, I imagine if I wrote that book, I would have a 1 album per artist rule.
I wonder if Diff Juz made the list.
I think you can make exceptions for artists and bands that are. I think New Order is a band that has multiple records that you should hear. I think that they've done enough. They have at least 2 distinct periods of their career and sounds that are equally important. So to different genres of music. So I feel like they're a band that's worth dipping into.
There's even this current period without Peter Hook too.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're referring to that, but there's even a post Peter Hook period that they're releasing records as well. There's so many eras of that band, I feel like, and they're just the transition and how I mean, it's always New Order, but you can hear those subtle changes, like more dance rock, less moody, kind of thing.
As a New Order fan, what would you recommend from the post 80s era for us to check out? Because that's an era that I like. Anything after the fifth record I've never listened to. So what do you recommend along those lines?
I mean, there's Regret.
Okay.
Republic.
Yeah.
I mean, I would buy Republic just for Regret. I mean, that song is just so good. I really liked Waiting for the Siren's Call, which came out early 2000s. I don't know the exact year, maybe 2004 or something. I like that record a lot. There's some like really classic, like, just that catchy pop, like rock songs on that record. I would say that's my favorite out of, because after Republic, the next record they put out was, Crystal was the single from it. What was that record called?
Get Ready?
Get Ready, yeah.
2001.
That, and then I think Waiting for the Siren's Call came after that. So yeah, I would say Waiting is my favorite. I actually like that last record they put out too, where Peter Hook wasn't on it.
Music Complete.
Yeah.
Music Complete. I thought that was a good record too. It surprised me how good it was, actually, because I'm always a little like, I had a little bit like, okay, no Peter Hook, can they do this, kind of thing. But yeah, it's great. I mean, it's a great record. But I'd say Waiting for the Siren's Call would be my pick.
Does Peter Hook have any records, or is that just a live?
Well, his current thing is Peter Hook and the Light, which he tours and just plays New Order albums all the way through, and Joy Division records. He did have some bands during New Order's hiatuses. One was called Revenge, and one was called Monaco. And if you listen to those records, they sound like New Order. They're like New Order rock songs pretty much. But currently he just has Peter Hook and the Light, and his son Jack plays bass in the band. So when Peter's singing, Jack will play bass. And then on the big solos, like Peter jumps in, and it's like two basses going. So it's pretty awesome.
Have you seen New Order live?
I've never seen New Order, but I've seen Peter Hook and the Light pretty much every tour he's done.
Yeah. Does New Order ever tour?
I don't know. They're more like a festival band at this point.
Yeah.
Or just giant venues in Manchester or something like that, But I don't think they're like, if they're touring, it's either like a festival tour or like, Madison Square Garden kind of thing,
Yeah. Gigantic arenas, yeah.
I mean, if I get a chance, I'll go for sure.
Right.
To see them play.
They have some stuff lined up, it looks like. They're playing. No, I thought maybe they were playing the what's the big festival that's happening next year? That's like every major 80s post-punk new wave band that's still around.
Yeah, I forgot what that's called. There's so many festivals. I mean, it's hard to remember all the names.
What is it? It's Cruel something. Cruel World. That's right.
Is that the one that Morrissey's on?
That's the one that Morrissey's on, yeah.
Yeah, people were mad at.
Which, he's until he gets mad and doesn't show up or, leaves after the first song or whatever he does. Yeah, I'm actually surprised New Order's not playing this, because it's like literally it's Bauhaus, Blondie, Devo, Echo and the Bunnymen, Psychedelic Furs.
I wonder though if New Order consider themselves where they kind of don't want to be associated with kind of like a festival like that's like so focused on the 80s.
Maybe
because I could see them feeling like since they're still releasing records and stuff, maybe they don't want it to be like a flashback band or something.
Yeah, we're not retro. We're
retro
true artists.
Right? Yeah. So I don't know, maybe. And they're already just playing like huge. Well, they're probably playing like Coachella and that kind of thing, I would guess. But
yeah, they're probably doing like Glastonbury or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think we've come to the end of anything I have left written down. Unless anyone else has anything they want to say.
Did you I don't know if the listeners or you heard it, but Voodoo tried to make an appearance on the podcast. I
Yeah.
don't know if anyone heard it or not.
I heard.
But yeah, she came in the room with her little hamburger toy in her mouth, like meowing, and walked up to me. So she was saying hello to everybody.
Hopefully the microphone will pick it up, and I'll
Listen
highlight
closely.
it and boost
Yes.
the volume on it.
Yeah, boost the volume, right.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for doing the show. Thank you for bringing this record for us to talk about. We haven't touched on New Order really on the show. We've talked about Joy Division, but it was like a EP, like their first EP, and we've talked around them or like about them, but we've never done a deep dive on a record. So thank you for choosing this record for us to talk about.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And I mean, anytime someone gives me a list of a year and says pick an album, I'm like, a kid in a candy store. I'm just like, oh, which one am I going to pick? And then anytime New Order's there, of course. So
yeah,
and I get to talk about Diff Juzz, which I hardly ever get to do. So this was cool.
Yeah. Please tell everyone where they can get a hold of the new record or follow you online. What do you recommend?
Well, you can order the record right now on our Bandcamp page, which is just Unwed Sailor, or you can get it at SpartanRecords.com. And you can also get it in record stores, especially when that vinyl gets shipped. Which actually, to be a little more specific, the vinyl will be available early August.
Nice.
So we're not that far away. Yeah, you can find us on Instagram, Unwed Sailor. That's where we're the most active. And of course, we have Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, you name it. We got it. YouTube, Unwed Sailor. Just type that in search and we'll pop up.
Absolutely. We'll make sure to include links to that as well in the show notes. And the very last thing we always ask our guests, what is a charity or a nonprofit that you would like to bring attention to for people to donate to? I'm hoping that got passed along in the original emails.
Yes, it did. And I mean, probably pretty obvious here since we've been talking about cats. And I would say that ASPCA would be the one. I'm a big animal fan. I really like them a lot. So any organization that's helping them is someone that I'd want to support.
Dylan and I are each cat owners as well, so that's something.
We got the Trinity here.
Yeah,
Trinity of cat owners. What's your cat's name? Or what? Yeah, I never got. What are your cat's names?
I have two boys. One is Edmund, and the other's Galileo.
Cool.
My cats are named Gracie and Beulah.
Awesome.
Beulah does the same thing with the toy where she'll carry it in and meow. Well, does your cat do that?
Yeah, Voodoo does that. Well, I have two, Voodoo Roo and Veruca Salt. Those are my two.
That's awesome. 6 cats in all in one.
Punk Lotto, 6 cats.
Well, awesome. Thank you again so much for doing the show. This was a blast. We really like talking to you.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.